our main and key session for the day today, and then we have a lunch. But before, of course, the person introduces Eminence Kalu Rinpoche, I wanted to introduce the person who's chairing it, Professor Nitasha Kaul. She's the host and the director of the Center for the Study of Democracy at the University of Westminster. And as I said in the morning, this entire conference has been possible because of her and the Center for the Study of Democracy. So thank you so much for this. Yeah. Again, we are not going to details of the bio here, but just to highlight specifically why Professor Kaul for this. Of course, apart from various other areas, she has worked on different aspects of the wider Himalayan region for over 2 decades and has been expert, apart from many other things, on Bhutan. Her research expertise, etc., has been on history, politics, and geopolitics of Bhutan as a small Himalayan state and other disciplines. On that note, let me pass it on to Nitasha. Over to you.
Real pleasure to be here with a fraternity and a community that many of us have very strong connections to and with, and I know several of the people in the room. I will shortly be introducing His Eminence Kalu Rinpoche. But before that, just to say thank you to the Tibetans and to everyone who made this possible. Of course, the center is the host, but we are, everyone here is equally important. And thank you, Dibesh, for that introduction. So with that, I want to first begin by introducing His Eminence Kalu Rinpoche. I sort of mentioned this to him before that he's an enlightened being. We are not. So but there's a little like a one alphabet difference in our names because I'm Kaul, K-A-U-L, but it makes for a significant difference. So His Eminence Kyabje Kalu Rinpoche is the lineage holder of the Shangpa Kagyu tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. At the age of 4, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and His Eminence Khenting Tai Situ Rinpoche recognized him as the reincarnation of the previous Kalu Rinpoche, who passed away in 1989. The previous Kalu Rinpoche had been the retreat master at Palpung Monastery in Tibet, and during the 1940s and 50s, at the request of the Bhutanese royal family, he established the 3-year retreat practice in Bhutan. The present Kalu Rinpoche continues to serve His Majesty the 5th King of Bhutan. With the blessings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Rinpoche continues the legacy of his predecessor to continue with his spiritual responsibilities, preserving and promoting the Shangpa Kagyu lineage practices and Tibetan culture, with the aim of connecting anyone interested in the teachings of the Buddha Dharma, bridging ancient wisdom with modern ways of living. Today, Rinpoche takes a modern approach to the teaching of Buddha Dharma, utilizing methods derived from Niguma yoga practice to promote mental and physical well-being in response to the 20th century's and 21st century's fast and chaotic world of materialism and stress. He also maintains and runs various charitable activities across the globe, and in keeping with the Shangpa lineage's history, he embraces the feminine aspect of Buddhist practice and wisdom, teaching regularly in many countries. We will have many interesting things to talk with the Rinpoche about, and then there is a chance for you also to make your comments and questions. But welcome, Tashdele. We are deeply grateful. And as you have probably realized by now that Rinpoche is a very dynamic, a very spiritually dedicated individual, and I have as part of this conversation, there's a few things that I would like to feature, and the first one is to ask, inquire of you, what meaning does His Holiness the Dalai Lama hold for you personally and as a Buddhist leader?
What time is it? Okay. Tashdele to everyone, and thank you so much for the organizers and University of Westminster for organizing such a beautiful event and inviting me over here. My personal relation with His Holiness Dalai Lama is equal to many other Himalayan Buddhist communities. It's not something that, handpick, special position, nothing like that, because we all love him as a living Buddha, and the living Buddha that does not pretend as a Buddha, but remains as a human being. And that is the reason why, Bhutan, Nepal, Tibet, Indian, and also the whole Buddhist communities and the international different religious community, we all love him. And for me, His Holiness Dalai Lama is very special in terms of my responsibility, because you see, when you have this monastic upbringing, even though I'm not a monk, but you have to go through the monastic training, 3 years retreat. I've done 3 years retreat when I was like 14 years old. I came out when I was 18. I had a beautiful picture about the Buddhism in what I read in my meditation box, but when you come outside of the retreat, the reality of the religion in Buddhism is absolutely different. There's no black and white. There's a lot of gray area. And then His Holiness Dalai Lama, what it done to me in my state of mind is that give me the realistic picture, how you should function, how you should engage, because normally in our very conservative religious world, we sit in a very high golden throne. And then His Holiness Dalai Lama, when he interacts with people, he sits on the stage, he sits on the chair. First glimpse of the thought impression I had was, maybe His Holiness is just trying to be relatable. But then later on I understood that his way of engaging with other people is beyond the religious hierarchy and engaging in the human level. And then the spiritual, religious, Buddhist, cultural level comes in the much more later stages. And that's something that helped me in my terms of responsibility, because we don't have a leadership training. We don't have a business training. We have a training of 3 years retreat. And during the retreat, I used to sleep a lot, so just to be clear. So don't expect any sort of a highly enlightened solutions for your life. But that is for me. And His Holiness Dalai Lama is the figure of how to be realistic and how to approach to the people and how to bring the 21st century Buddhist Dharma into our daily life. And he is the Dalai Lama that is not of the Tibetans only, but he himself, he said, he's the Dalai Lama of the world. And it have taught me a lot, and also how you teach and how you interact and how you engage. And it has been very helpful, and it is my absolute refuge as well.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure we can relate to what you said about His Holiness. As Dibesh also mentioned, he visited us at this university, and and I remember I still have a picture of him holding hands, holding my hand. So it is indeed quite transformative. Following on from something you said, could you say a bit more about his significance for peoples in the wider Himalayan region beyond Tibet?
Well, you see, His Holiness Dalai Lama is an emanation of our Lokateshvara, and that is from the religious point of view. And from the human point of view, just like I have explained earlier, that he's a great human being with a great love and compassion, regardless of different nationalities, regardless of different culture. And Bhutan, Nepal, Tibet, India, we share, and then also Mongolia, we share one kind of a group of Buddhism, which we call it a Vajrayana Buddhism. That is the majority of our practices and so on. If you look at Southeast Asia, it's mainly Theravada. If you look at China, then it's mainly Mahayana, and Vietnam is mainly Mahayana and so on. So His Holiness Dalai Lama is the symbol and the figurehead of all our faith and practice and lineage and tradition. Because many people, they tend to say that His Holiness Dalai Lama is a Gelug lineage holder. I would say that you haven't studied history well enough, because if you really examine all the history of the different religious figures, all of them has an interconnected relation, whether it's a spiritual, whether it's a teachings and empowerment and practice. There is no such thing as a singular lineage of Kagyu, singular lineage of Nyingma, singular lineage of Gelug. If you trace back of all the great masters, many of the great masters, they practice Dzogchen, Chakchen, and they all kind of have a genuine respect. It's like when you have a good heart and sincere and genuine quality, and then naturally, just like yourself, other counterpart individual tend to attract to you, interact with you in exchange of their experience and practices, isn't it? So if you understand that Vajrayana history, all the great masters always have this kind of a interrelation with each other, and having that understanding is important rather than leader of one sectarian, one lineage, and one this.
Yes, that's a point very well taken, given that we live in a world where walls are easier to build, divisions are easier to hold on to than unity. And compassion is, of course, the root of all of this. And whether we look at this geographically or in other ways, the interconnectedness and entanglements are quite clear. Turning for a moment to your own views, Rinpoche, I would, as you might also have gathered, from what I read of Rinpoche's bio earlier, that you have, I should say, perhaps modern and progressive views on on a lot of topics, including on gender. And I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that.
I wouldn't say modern. I would say just being practical and pragmatic. I think that is very important, because if you, being a Buddhist means having a little bit of science, having a little bit of logic, having a little bit of wisdom, having a little bit of human ethic value, not the perfect condition, of course, but just a little bit of element together defines you as a Buddhist believer, or Buddhist practitioner. That is my understanding. And from my also understanding, I'm the chairman of the Bhutanese LGBTQ and so on. And they asked me to support them and etc. And then I said, well, Buddhism, we don't have this idea of, women should be less and men should be more. And like previous Kalu Rinpoche in the 1970s, he was the first Buddhist figure who established the 3S retreat centers for men and women in the 1974. So there is and then we work with all the different nationalities over the last 40 years. And then also the last 15, 16 years of my responsibility, I engage with so many different culture background, and different individuals as well. The most important is a human quality. And if you don't have a human quality, and then you're pretty much not useful to yourself or to others. And I think that is far more important. And Buddhist point of view is all about finding your own happiness beyond the illusionary mind, and not the illusionary happiness, but beyond the illusionary mind happiness. And that is the absolute goal of the Buddha Dharma. As long as that you walk towards that path, and the rest of it, you can keep it a little bit relaxed and less judgmental. The last thing the Buddhist thinks that we should, last thing that it should come from the Buddhist point of view is to telling you how to live your life. The world is already full of suffering and a lot of struggle and challenges, and the last thing you need is a religious organization telling you how to think and how to live, and that is not what we need. What we need is a more solution, more middle path, and more sense of deeper reflection in oneself, and that is important.
Thank you very much, Rinpoche. I'm sure you're being very modest and perhaps not modern, but I think these are very profound points that you're making about the significance of not judging other people from one's own point of view.
I judge a lot of people.
Well, we practice. What would life be without practice?
I judge in silence.
It's
that's the unique part.
It's friction that makes the mirror polished.
Yes.
Turning on for a moment to to a few I guess zoomed out long range questions. How do you see, or what would you like to say about the legacy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama 20 or 30 years into the future? The 14th.
I was there in Dharamsala for the few days of meetings of the Religious and Culture Conference. And of course, at the head of the meeting was His Holiness. And there's many, many religious figures from different traditions of the Buddhist traditions. And everybody shared their own topics and their own agendas and their own point of view and about the reincarnations and so forth. And from my side, it was very simple. I shared with one of the group of Rinpoches and Khenpos and professors. I said to them, just as in very humble opinion, not as a commanding sense. And I said, His Holiness have gone through much more than us in life, and telling him what to do is the last thing we should be doing. And that's number one. Number two is that we just have to show absolute loyalty to his wishes, to the end. And long as that is there, everything is fine. We should not be the one who tell His Holiness that how it should be reincarnated, the way it should be reincarnated, how it should be done. That is not our responsibility, because His Holiness has gone through as a human being, not in a religious sense. Religious sense, it's an enlightened being, bodhisattva, then it goes quite far away, without judgmental and so on. But as a human being, he have gone through enough pain and suffering and experience and exposure about the world, and we should not be the one who should be dictating anything, but be absolute loyal and dedicated. And that was my comment, and I stand by that, because I am a Buddhist practitioner first and foremost, and then His Holiness Dalai Lama is our religious figurehead. So that's why the number one is that important part. And the number two is that the succession and the legacy. This is my message to all the Buddhist communities around the world. I want to use this platform to share with all of you. You see, the religious dialogue is good, but sometimes it can be not moving anything over time, because in France we have a religious dialogue. In French Department of Culture, in order to hold the license as a Buddhist charitable organization, we are obligated to have an interreligious faith. But in that scale of the interreligious faith, that is absolutely good compared to other different countries which they don't even acknowledge other religion other than their own religion. So the France and England and such a developed country, they're doing very good. But as a Buddhist community, you are going towards a little bit different path. And I think that interreligious dialogue is not enough. Following your own Rinpoche and your own religious figures is not enough. What you need to think is how to countermeasure in the long run. And you cannot countermeasure based on this is my culture, this is my identity, this is my Rinpoche, this is my Dharma center, this is my lineage. You cannot counteract anything with that. That is bound to fail in the long run. What you need to focus is to make sure that all the Buddhist community coming together, creating a spiritual hub in their own region. It doesn't have to be in one place, or only in here, or only in India, or only in England. It can be international. It has to create a religious, cultural, economic hub on your own, with your own sense of dedication. I think that is very important, because when you don't have an economic structure around it, and the religious entity tend to influence, switch wherever there is a favor. You understand? So therefore, you need to surround yourself with a strong economic structure. It doesn't have to be in one place. It can be in a different place around the world, with all the great different Rinpoches coming together, giving teaching, all the Tibetan community, Himalayan community coming together, giving a teaching, doing a conference. I think that is very important. And then it has to be surrounded with strong economic structure, equally, not just as spiritual. And I think that is very important from my point of view. It should not be in one place only. It can be in various places around the world. And because, you see, I brought the relic of the Lord Buddha, basically the bone of the Buddha, from France. It was gifted from Indian governor during the colonial time, 200 years ago, and gifted to the Thai monarchy. And then it was prophesied that that relic should go to the West after 200 years. And then in 2009, the Thai monarchy, patron, they offered to the French government. It became the state property. And then I brought that relic to Bhutan last year in November. We did the whole tour. The reason that I brought that relic to Bhutan is that because when I went to the rural area, some people have a disability, some people have a health condition, financial condition, and sometimes they wait on the side of the road to get a glimpse of me for 2 seconds. And then, of course, I come out of the car and interact with them, each of them, whoever I meet on the side of the road. And then I told myself, I don't have the miracle to give to them, but at least I can bring the Buddha to them. So I brought the relic of the Buddha, and around 240,000 people got the blessing within the span of 2 weeks, which is around the third of population of Bhutan, number one. Number two, I'm going to bring the same relic to Australia, because Australia has Vietnamese, Chinese, Tibetan, Bhutanese, Nepali, Indian communities, and Cambodian Buddhist. Because that sense of unity initiative is very important. And it is not something that I am saying I can do, it's something that you should create that idea, create that agenda, create that movement. I think it's very important. Depending on one or two person is too fragile in the long run. Because who knows, I may die tomorrow with a heart attack, right? Then you write in the newspapers, oh, so sad, he passed away, Kalu Rinpoche passed away. So it's too fragile. So therefore, all of you as a Buddhist community working towards sense of unity and strengthening your network, strengthening your voice and your point of view about the Buddhist approach as a unity, and which is the preservation of His Holiness Dalai Lama. It comes together anyway, you see? So I think that is very important from my side. Like an example, when we bring the relic in Australia, it will become a tour throughout Australia. We will bring it to Canberra and Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne. And there is no dispute when there is a relic of the Buddha, but rather a blessing for everyone. So that sense of, this is something that I'm doing from my side. And at the end of the day, all of you as a Buddhist community have to focus into a bigger picture. Buddhist dialogue is good, but it's not enough to countermeasure it. Because a separate organization, the way they countermeasure it, they're spending a lot of money, a lot of funding. And you have to be realistic on that. You can't just make a prayer and make everything go away. In order to countermeasure, you need a budget. You need a community, you need an agenda, you need religious figures, you need a commitment. Not an excitement with the commitment of, oh yes, we are going to do that this weekend, but a rather long-term, subtle, stable commitment. And that is one way of preserving His Holiness Dalai Lama's legacy, right? So that is just my opinion. I'm sorry, I overshared. I will get into trouble.
Not at all. I think there are a few really relevant things that I think the significance of steady and measured commitment over longer runs of time to a goal rather than short-term fervor is a very important point around the linking of the spiritual and the temporal, which you pointed out quite clearly, that that the temporal aspect is important, the practical aspect is important. So thank you for those reflections. And also, I think we all appreciate the fact of what you said about sharing the merits and bringing that to the people who may not be able to reach it. And I think you anticipated with that, the other, perhaps the final thing that I wanted to ask you, which was about how do you see, so you've already mentioned the significance of global Buddhist unity and specific initiatives that can make this possible. I wondered if you would like to say a bit more about that, about the significance and what can people do? To turn this back to you, since you were talking about practical things, what can people who are not a Rinpoche do? People who are not you, what can they do?
I think from my point of view, we can have a lot of different ideas with a grand project, grant funding, grant from this institutions or individuals and so on. Having a sense of deeper reflection in oneself is very important. Practicing compassion a little bit. You can be still angry time to time, You know, just like His Holiness Dalai Lama mentioned about the mosquito, you know. He can be compassionate, but at some point it gets irritating. So you have to draw a line in some aspect. But I think being practical, realistic, and practicing meditation and having a deeper reflection in oneself is very much needed, because without these few principles, to succeed in such a long-term vision and the goal is almost impossible. So you have to sustain yourself in terms of your perception of the reality and the pacing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, and it is of course a great pleasure and an honor to be hearing your thoughts and to be sharing this this panel, and also you know, the apart from the Buddhist compassion and those values, the thing that you mentioned about Bhutan and bringing that to Bhutan is also really resonated with me, as it's a country very dear to me. So I think with that, I don't know, Rinpoche, if you would like to make any closing remarks before we open the floor, or would you like to do that at the end, however you want.
If they have questions, and I'm open to it, but just don't barbecue me, please. That's all.
So I think this is where this actually is good for time as well. So now we move into the Q&A and any comments and questions from the floor. So there is a roving mic, and that gentleman at the back first, and then that lady there, and then you.
Thank you. Just two quick points.
It would be good if you wish to say who you were.
My name is Adam. Two quick points. Maybe they sound complex, but I'm sure you can simplify them very much. We have Abrahamic faith, and we have Buddhism. How you compare Buddhism to Abrahamic faith in terms that Abrahamic faith, they have God and angels and the hell and hellfire and heaven. The other point, Abrahamic, it's about the Abrahamic faith also, the second point. In Abrahamic faith, we see 6,000 years of wars and infighting between maybe infighting in the same religion and between religion and other religions within the Abrahamic faith. So did we see in Buddhism last few thousand years any, I don't say infighting, conflict or, you know, anything like that?
Conflict with whom exactly?
With Buddhism, Buddhism with Buddhism.
So
Other different shades or different, I don't know. Because Abrahamic faith, they have many wars against each other.
Oh,
but
Buddhism, we have a big conflict, big one, that is with oneself. We have a big conflict with oneself all the time, and we complain about it, we make a prayer about it, we meditate about it, we do retreat about it. So that's that. But from the Buddhist point of view, there's no such prophecy on conflict and so on. And we just believe in that over the time, there will be such thing as a degenerate on the Lord Buddha's teaching, and then afterwards, then there will be another Buddha who will revive the teachings, the ultimate truth, and loving compassion and bodhisattva level of capacity in practice. So that's what we, think.
thank you. We'll take the questions one by one. I think that
Yes,
would be
yes.
better. And thank you. That was really interesting. The
It's okay.
non-abiding structure of the self.
Oh,
Tashi Rinpoche, it's a great privilege and honor to listen to you in person. I know you've been here in the UK before, but I always missed your talks because I was not here, so I did not have a karma, but today I'm here and able to listen to your talk. Thank you so much. My question is more about political advocacy as far as His Holiness the Dalai Lama's succession is concerned. Given your experience of having visited UK so many times, and also I know about your successful outreach in the Baltic states as well. So my question is, as far as the West is concerned, how do you think the governments here should counteract China's politicization of the reincarnation issue? Thank you so much.
oh my goodness.
He's I have some I have some experience of this. He has also been a former student in my diplomacy
Yes,
class,
yes,
and
yes.
he's brilliant. But
Yeah.
however you want to answer it.
You have, sir, you have crucified me now. From my very little experience, every country has their own national interest. None of the country around the world put other countries first. They will put their own country first. Number two is their, investment in their own country, whether it's an economical relation or cultural relation or friendship with some network people and so on. It's all combined together. So countering it, I think the most important in the long run is, number one, to speak the truth, and follow the path and the vision of His Holiness Dalai Lama. That's number one. And number two is lobbying. If you don't have a strong lobbying, and then even you have the ultimate truth, it gets sidelined very quickly. That's how any government functions around the world. You can bribe some officials, but that doesn't last long. But if you lobby it with the authentic mission in your mind, a long-lasting mission, not just to fulfill your own pocket or your friend's pocket, but a long-lasting mission, if you're lobbying it, whatever it may be, it will be successful in the long run. And you need to have a good team. You need to have a good appetite, and then you need to carry on with the disappointment. You will hit the wall many times. And you need to have that tolerance and resilient at the same time. Because right now, 1970s and 60s and 80s, the Tibet has been the issue of all the medias, pop culture. Now the Gaza and Palestinian is the pop culture that everybody wants to do hashtag and post and so on. So the whole crisis around the world will go up and down. But if you function your protest and your activists based on the trend, then it will not last long. But you have to be steady, lobbying the right people, and strategize yourself, and willingness to face the wall time to time. And I think that is very important. And bribing an official will never help. It will help maybe short term, but it will not help in the long run. So shortcut is not always the answer in the bigger picture. That is just my opinion. Is it okay? Yeah?
Some important life lessons buried there as well. The gentleman here, please.
Okay. Is that working? Yes, I think so. Martin Mills, I shan't stand up or I'll drop the camera, which there's a spiritual message there somewhere. All right, I'm not going to try and barbecue you, but
Thank you.
This is a genuine question.
No, sir.
All right, and it comes to the root of your message about the ensuring stable economic structures around Sangha groups and around groups of laity and things on those lines. Now, of course, the Tibetan and Himalayan cultures have been doing this for millennia. Mm-hmm. They have the Jindak structure, they have land rights that are given over and gifted by kings and so on, and all of this creates stability.
Yes.
Now, obviously, in the Western context, we live in a commercial capitalist world. A commercial capitalist world which, in economic terms, many people who have spoken here today, Tsering Yangki, for example, and Father Freeman, I think I've said it myself, many people identify the economic system with creating many of the problems of materialism that lead to spiritual collapse, and against which people get a little individualistic and they hide away and do their meditation. So I guess the question is, if we're talking about the balance sheet, and we're talking about making certain the books run, and in my experience, Tibetan monasteries are really generally pretty good at making the books work, and making the money work. But isn't there a clash? Is there something, for example, in your opinion, I'll give you the question, in your opinion, is there something about the way in which the modern capitalist, commercialist world works that is fundamentally corrosive to spiritual life? And if so, how do you sort out the economics?
I haven't studied economics, so I don't know
Sorry.
I haven't studied economics, so I don't know. I don't have a degree on that. You understand our culture very well. The sponsor and the land and sense of the whole community. You'd see, I oversee around 55 meditation centers around the world. And when I first thrown in, I was sharing this with Father Lawrence, that I didn't study business, but I was thrown into this kind of a real estate management crisis. When I was in the retreat, you were told, you make a prayer, be good, be sincere, everything works by itself. And prayer to the divine being, and then everything comes by itself. And that is absolutely true. But the hardship was never far away. So when I first started when I was 19 years old, I had absolute zero experience. But I have to uphold this meditation centers around the world, and many of them are in the financial crisis and different kind of crisis. And I had to manage it over time, slowly, step by step. A certain time I got very fortunate, and sometime it was very hard, challenges and so on. What I've noticed during my difficult time is that people tend to come with the money with a certain agenda. And it can be turned into a political narrative point of view. They can say, oh, let me offer this much for you, so you don't need to have a headache. But in return, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. It's not your problem. It's their problem. It's not your problem. Now multiply that in 1,000, and then the Buddhist activist is gone. And then the how can I say, the devotion and the love and devotion towards His Holiness Dalai Lama, it can be crafted in a way, manufactured in a way that as if that it gone away. But it was planned, masterfully planned from the beginning. So that's why it's very important, if you really care about the legacy of His Holiness Dalai Lama, the whole Buddhist community has to work together, come together, share the experience, and share basically more like a firewall. So you need to have that so that it doesn't become politicized under any circumstances. And then on the other hand, just because you are Buddhist does not mean you are enlightened, right? You are Buddhist, you're still, walking towards the path of enlightenment. Doesn't mean that you are Mr. Perfect. But in order to preserve the legacy of His Holiness Dalai Lama, you have to be realistic. But less paranoia, more realistic. You need to prepare ahead of time. If you prepare in the last minute, any plan is a wrong plan. So you need to have this kind of a realistic approach, and I think it's very important. Is it okay? Yeah?
Thank you very much, Rinpoche. I actually have a PhD in economics and philosophy.
Thank you so much.
My first book is called Imagining Economics Otherwise. So I just wanted to add that there is actually a link between value and values. We just have to, if the values are shared enough, then value can come out of these values that can be shared. And also I think there are good and bad, extreme and less extreme capitalist ways of thinking about value, right? So it is also possible to challenge that economically rational thing is the only rational thing. And I think persuasion there plays a role. But okay,
Yes.
The lady here. Oh, sorry. Did someone? Yes, over here.
Okay. There's.
It's an honor, Rinpoche, that you're here. Thank you. Given that we have such a stressed world, could you say something about how the Niguma Yoga and Dream Yoga could help? And also, did the fact that it's Dakini influence your notion of the feminine? It would be really interesting to hear that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. How it can help the Niguma yoga into your stressful life? Yeah. I want to make a little bit of joke, but it's inappropriate, so I'm going to let that go. Anyway, I think with the Niguma yoga, or basically it's a meditation, synchronized with the breath and the body and the mind together. And that's why it is helpful. And the second reason why it is going to be helpful is because when you're doing a yoga, and the first phase of the yoga, you are basically releasing a chemical from your brain called adrenaline. So when you release the chemical adrenaline, what it does is that you're kind of zoning in into your posture, into your rhythm, into your movement and meditation. And once you find that kind of zoned in releasing of the adrenaline, which is when you do certain posture in the Niguma yoga, that is equivalent to 30 to 40 minutes of running, because when you go for a walk and run, it takes 15, 20 minutes to warm up. And then 30 minutes, then you're kind of in the zone. So with the yoga, you can do a few 7 sequence, and then you're in the state of the zone, kind of a very concentrated, but pretty much relaxed, because your body and the breath and the mind are synchronizing together. And when you have that kind of a sense of quality that is developed over the time, and then you tend to have a deeper sense of reflection in oneself and awareness, the surrounding as well, and some sort of flexibility in your mind, and due to that, the perception of the reality becomes more receptive towards the understanding of the meaning of impermanence. Because if you just think about the meaning of impermanence, the mitapa, and just like that, it's very hard to hit in your mind. But then if you have a sense of relaxation and deeper reflection in oneself, awareness of your surrounding, then you have a meaning of impermanence, more deeper reflection, and then you are able to adapt and have resilient, more quicker and more long-lasting as well. And that is how you counter the stress as well. But the lack of preparation also creates stress as well. So, so you cannot blame the yoga and meditation always. Yeah.
The lady here.
Yes.
And then the gentleman next to her.
Okay. Emma, doing good with the time? Okay.
Yes, we have about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
Hello, Mohini Noon. My question is about women in Buddhism, and I believe the most senior nun is lesser than the most junior monk. And in 2011, at that very big Buddhist conference in Delhi, I chaired the session on women in Buddhism. We had 6 women panelists, including Jetsun Pamo.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggested we have 1 token male, so we did. And but you know, a lot of these issues came up, starting, of course, with historical roots of inequality with Mahaprajapati and how much she had to go through to get initiation. So, what is the position today, and is there anybody at centrally, who can handle this situation, or is the Buddhist community so fragmented that nobody really can do anything much with it except tinker in pockets?
Mm-hmm. So basically, from my understanding, the Niguma lineage, Sukhasiddhi lineage, both of them, they are female figures. And both of them, they are great Mahasiddhas of India, not just well known in the small village, but rather well known in the whole Vajrayana world. And that's number one. And number two is that previous Kalu Rinpoche, like I mentioned earlier, in the 1970s, he was the first religious figure who put men and women in a 3-year retreat equally, and then calling them and giving them the title of the Lama as well. So that was the first time in the history of the Vajrayana Buddhism, coming to the West, establishing 3-year retreat, and so on. And then the third is, I think, having a monk and having a nun, and being a great practitioner or great yogini also, it doesn't matter, long as there's a great practitioners And I think the respect and the devotion will be automatically there. And that is my understanding. Did I give a very vague answer?
It is, because that's internal. What about the institution and the rules?
I haven't handled any nunnery, so I cannot speak as if that I'm expert on it. Yeah. But we do look after the female 3S retreats in France. And they come out very well as a practitioner. Like an example, when they come out of the, 1 year before the 3S retreat is finished, I tell them, I don't give a damn about your nature of mind. What I do give a damn is that your physical tolerance and meditative yogic capacity, yoga and meditation capacity. If you're able to show that, then I want to listen to your nature of the mind. Otherwise, the nature of the mind becomes an idea. So they did many Niguma yoga practice, and then on the day of the repa, we call it, they wear white cloths, like I did that when I was 18. So you wear white cloth, you wear nothing but the white cloth, and then you have to walk around the temple very slowly in the very freezing temperature to signify your inner quality, that your mind is beyond the experience of the physical level. And I said to them, I did that, and I have a name of Rinpoche, but I pretty much put my own effort, even though I'm a very lazy practitioner. So you guys should do the same. And they did incredibly well. And so I don't know about all the other organization, but if you are a genuine practitioner, then I offer my prostration and refuge to you. So even those who are, let alone about the nun and the female Rinpoches and the yoginis, even though they are monk, sometime when they make a prostration to me, and I said, when they make prostration this side, I run to the corner. I said to them, yes, I have a name of Rinpoche, but I'm not beyond the clothes of the Buddha, the robe of the Buddha. So you have to be respected. Yes, I have a name of Kalu Rinpoche, but I respect you as a Sangha first. And then we can talk about the culture, integration, how we think, and so on and so forth. So at the end, it really comes down to a practitioner themselves. Yeah.
Thank you. And of course, a very important question. And this is something we were also speaking about before. Where's the microphone? When in reading about it, the particular predecessors and the lineage of the Shangpa and the female predecessors that Rinpoche referred to, that's quite empowering. But of course, these challenges remain. Please go ahead.
I was also there in Delhi. It's so nice to be able to meet you at the IBC. Again, my name is Cameron. I have two quick questions. One bridges off of your question, Lady Mohini. One of the discussions at the IBC from representatives of Sanghas across Asia is the number of boys who want to become monks is declining quite quickly in some places. That the Sangha is becoming much smaller. And I was wondering if you had any comments about other forms of, not necessarily monasticism, but other forms the Sangha might take in the future when there is declining interest in lifelong monasticism. The second question, it goes back to your original comments and your role as well, Nitasha. If you could tell us a little bit more about the perspective among youth in Bhutan towards someone like the Dalai Lama. Are they reading his books? Are they watching videos of him online? Is he somebody that they're interested in, or is he somebody that their youth community doesn't know as well as perhaps other parts of the Himalayas? So those are two questions. Thank you.
Okay. The first question is that due to the decline of the monks, and then what was the following of that?
What kind of interest there is among youth in Bhutan in the Dalai Lama himself?
Yeah, and then the one before that, you asked the other previous question.
The previous question is, in some parts of Asia, there's decline in the number of boys who want to become monks, or the number of parents who want their children to become lifelong monks.
Yes.
So what do you think will happen to the future of the Sangha if that continues?
Okay. I'm not a monk, but I look after the monastery and I observe the whole movement. I think from my side, because of the the technology that we have, the information that we see is overwhelming. And there was a time that if you are in the monastery, you are not allowed to have phones, sort of. And then it went from you're not allowed to have phone to everybody having a phone. And then now some monastery, they kind of switch back into everybody can have a phone, on the weekend only, but not on the weekdays. So that is the reality. And because in a previous time, of course, there's a small number of people who want to seek enlightenment and renunciation. Then there's the other portion who are doing it because their uncle said so, their father said so, their mother said so, and so on. Then there's a third portion who have a very hard life, and then they want to enter the monastery. So the reality of what you're seeing now, the decline of the people becoming a monk and becoming a less monk and so on compared to 1990s, is that the last portion. The first two portion is not in effect right now because the great master are still there, and then great institutions are still there, the 3S retreats are still there. But it seems like there's a less interest, but it's not. It's just that certain group of people, the third category, who are just looking for a better opportunity, they seem to find alternative. Where in the 1990s, the only alternative is that you join the monastery, and one day Rinpoche will appoint you as the resident Lama of France, or United Kingdom, or United States, and that's how you support your own family, for the health, education, the livelihood, and so on. But that portion is reducing because everybody has a lot of information, technology, and their own ambition. But the two other portion who are told to be monk because of their parents, and then also because of their own will, that is not being reduced. And these two portions will ultimately hold the nunnery, the monk, the sangha, the practice, which is not a problem. Because if you look in Vietnam, there's massive temples throughout the country, and each monastery has, I think, around 5 monks. Biggest monastery, they have around like 60. But because of the quality standard of the monks, they're able to influence the foreign policy of the country, and then the domestic policy of the country, and economic policy of the country. Therefore, the people feel relevant to their culture, their religion, their faith, right? So that's my understanding. And then the second question that you have, what is the connection from the Bhutanese? Bhutanese people, we have a long history of the Tibetan migration coming to the center of Bhutan for centuries, just like how Tibetans view Guru Rinpoche as the Buddha, and Bhutan view exactly the same. That's number 2. Then number 3, whenever there's His Holiness Dalai Lama's teaching in Bodh Gaya, there's always a mass movement coming out of Bhutan, and then receiving teachings in empowerment. And if you look at the central part of Bhutan, there's a lot of Tibetan population who have migrated since 300, 400 years ago. And so on. And many of
shared points are part of it. I mean, I'm also a professor of politics, international relations, and critical interdisciplinary studies, so I will say that yes, there are practical other reasons for a small Himalayan, state to have differences in some of the external projection. But as far as Buddhism is concerned, of course, people are deeply reverential. There, and then the
I believe. There.
And I think those will be the last 2 questions. I'm sorry for anyone because we're almost at time. So, yeah.
My name is Sering Tokyal. I work at the University of Birmingham.
Nice.
I cannot think of a better person to ask this question, which is essentially how Tibetans, the Bhutanese, and other people who live in the Himalayas can work together to protect what is essentially a common civilization.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Of course, we have histories where we had disagreements. There are local differences, in terms of identity, and we live under different political jurisdictions, but we have a common civilization that we got from our ancestors, right? So you are the best person to ask, this question too, because you straddle the world between the Tibetans and the Bhutanese and other people, relevant people, right? So my first question is why we don't see more, interest among, at least my perception, in political developments in Tibet, among, of course, there's a lot of loyalty and devotion to His Holiness and other Tibetan Lamas, but when it comes to political developments in Tibet, I perceive a lack of sort of interest and activism, within the Bhutanese or other Himalayan communities. Obviously, I'm trying not to generalize too much, but if we see the activism in the Muslim world on issues like Palestine, we don't see a similar kind of activism within the broader Buddhist world, but also within the small Tibetan Buddhist world when it comes to Tibet. Because what is happening in Tibet is an assault on the entire civilization, right? Not just the sort of institution of the Dalai Lama, but the entire, institution, reincarnation, Tibetan Buddhism, Tibetan language, all of this is coming under attack, right? So when the bigger Tibetan sort of Buddhist, civilization breaks away, then I would see, a threat to Bhutanese or Ladakhi identities as people, right? So what explains the fact that we don't see a lot of interest and activism on political matters to do with Tibet? And the second question is, how can our communities work together to, in the future to protect our common civilization? Because today Tibet is under Chinese occupation and is facing this assault. But as Buddhists, we know that things always change, right? 50, 100 years down the line, it could be Bhutan or another community that may come under similar kind of, attacks, occupation or assault. So what can we do in the short term and in the long term together to protect?
Thank you, Sring. We need some time to respond as well. We'll take both these last questions together, okay? Because we're really at the edge of time, and so if you also try to be brief, if possible.
I also have two questions. I'm so sorry, but I'll ask them very quickly. The first one is that you spoke to the need for unity among us as Buddhists, and I wonder, does that also reverberate out to our personal practice? So maybe if you could speak more to Rime and its importance in this time, and maybe your personal practice too. And the second one is, a little bit of this was answered, but your particular opinion, I know not asking for the answer, on how monastic institutions need to change at this time, or maybe how they are changing and whether that's helpful or not, particularly thinking about monastic institutions within India, like anything from Dzongsa to Sera, Ganden, on these changes.
Thank you. Okay.
I am not their representative. So please don't ask me the question that I cannot decide. I think about the Rime practice, I think it really comes down to the mentor and the teacher that you have, because some tend to be very strict and say this is the only lineage you practice, and some tend to be, you can explore everything and everything is a dharma. And I think the most important is that long as you have a bodhicitta in heart, and you see the example. In His Holiness Dalai Lama, he received many different teachings from so many great different masters in the 90s and the 80s and so on. And that is the example. So you cannot argue, say, yeah, my teacher is better than His Holiness Dalai Lama, right? Because His Holiness Dalai Lama is not just within our Buddhist community, but also with the interreligious faith. So if you want to have a bigger picture with yourself and practicing Dharma, I think a little bit of relaxed mindset is very important. And that depends on your mentor. Like an example, when I teach yoga and meditation, I always tell the participant, I'm not your guru. You're here to practice, I'm here to share. Because the moment you say I guru-student thing, and then they feel, okay, I cannot criticize, I cannot say anything bad to him, I cannot express myself, and then everything becomes kind of narrow-minded, and they try to become the person that they are not. So I always tell them, I'm happy to share my experience. You come here, we exchange, we practice, that's it. And then, if you really want to be a student, and then you be the student of the Buddha Dharma. And that's the most important. It's not so much to do with the personality cult, right? So that is not really needed. That's my point of view. And all the institutions, it really comes down to the leadership of the institutions, where they have traveled or not. If there are institutional leaders who are only traveling in their own village, in their own vicinity, and then they don't see the different culture, different mindset, or different exchange of different religious faith and so on, and then the whole idea of change doesn't come. So if the religious figures, the more they travel, the more they become, openness to change. So it really comes down to that. So you can't really force the religious figures to please travel 24/7 to explore and be exposed to yourself in the modern world. You can't do that either. So it depends on their own network and responsibility that they have, and their own personal passion as well, right? So it really comes down to that. Yeah. So that's that.
And the question
Tsiringla.
Sring had.
Tsiringla, my answer to you is that, of course, I'm not a Bhutanese government official, so I can speak freely. I don't have to follow protocols, so yeah. Regarding the preservation and the culture of Buddhism, the geopolitical attention will be always there. Like His Holiness Dalai Lama mentioned, I think it was Pakistan and India having a crisis. And His Holiness Dalai Lama mentioned, and also I think between China or India, something like that, His Holiness mentioned that you cannot move your whole country to somewhere else. You have to adapt, you have to cooperate, you have to find your way to have a coexistence. But sometimes the big countries don't think about coexistence, whichever the big country may be. They think about absolute dominance. And that's how human being we function. The bigger we are, then we press someone down, in the snap of a finger. We don't have a second thought. And also the character of the country, the leaders of the country, they function similarly. Not just one country, but many countries around the world. That's my observation. And regarding the preservation of the Buddha Dharma and the culture, His Majesty, the King of Bhutan, recently he initiated this project called the Gelifu Mindfulness City, and it's around 4 times the size of the Singapore, and it basically is to create a Vajrayana hub, and then there's an invitation to all the different schools. Sacha, Kagyu, Gelu, Chona, all the meditation centers to practice their own way of doing it. So in terms of the preservation-wise, that is there. And Bhutan is too small to voice against anybody, and they have to follow the relation with how the India is functioning in that way. And if you observe the United Nations, when there's a lot of vote happening, the Bhutan always stands neutral. When there's a lot of vote happening green and red, and the Bhutan is always neutral. So that is not something that will change overnight. But in terms of the preservation of the Vajrayana, the preservation of the Buddha Dharma, at least there's some sort of a different angle, because before Bhutan used to be very conservative to their own Drupa Kagyu lineage only, and as a religion of the country. But now it's being open to the south of Bhutan to create this economic hub. It's like a one country, two system, and also a spiritual hub, and the medical hub as well. So the people come for their health, longevity, and also teachings from all the great masters, and so on. So that's that. I hope my answer is not too strong or not too soft.
No, I think that's.
That's it.
If
My question was less about the official government sort of actions.
Yeah.
But the general public.
The general public, from my observation, general public, they are quite busy with their own. Some they say I'm Nyingma, and then some they say I'm Drupa Kagyu, and then some follow Dzongsa Khyentse, and then some follow, this figure and that figure. So they're quite busy, and some of them, have this sympathy and then sense of, oh, this is happening, but then they are too little to voice anything out or set up any organization, sort of. So things like that. That's the reality. There's a fragmentation. So.
Yeah, and also since we are in a university and you are an academic as well, a fellow academic, I want to just say that part of this is also about thinking about academic knowledge creation and how that matters. I've, for the last 20 years, as I was mentioning to you, been writing on the history, politics, and geopolitics of Bhutan and the region. And one of the things that is very important to me is this focus on small states and what I've called subalternizing geopolitics. So, you don't look at just India and China downwards, but you look at smaller polities upwards to think about, how we understand what knowledge means and appreciate initiatives like, for instance, the GMC in this context. We also have two, I also have two Bhutanese PhD students, which is, I think, rare for any UK university. So it's partly also about knowledge making to understand the history, the politics, and the geopolitics, and all of that, how that feeds into the ideas. Just for a moment speaking as a scholar. But thank you very much. This has been brilliant. I'm sure we all feel that there have been many thoughtful, thought-provoking, and interesting, and also, things we will cherish and that will grow within us as seeds. So thank you very much for this. Thank you, everyone, for your engagement, for your questions, for the topics you've brought up. And of course, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. We are absolutely sort of going to, Divesh is hinting to say that we need to. Okay. There is the most important announcement about food that needs to be made. But thank you so much, and please.
So, what happens when you have a very prominent and articulate Rinpoche and articulate professor together? We do not stick to time, but that's partly because we had questions. That's fine. We have exactly 32 minutes for lunch.